Right now, while you scroll, the world is spending money on war faster than at any point in human history. In 2025, the bill hit $2.887 trillion. Trillion with a T. A brand new record for the 11th year in a row. Here is the part they leave off the recruitment poster. Every one of those dollars lands in somebody's bank account. You paid in. Taxes, higher prices, sometimes in blood. Somebody else cashed out. My name is Ryan, and I want to figure out one simple, uncomfortable thing. Who actually gets rich from war, and why you and I always end up paying for it? War is the oldest business on Earth, and business has never been better. Over the next 10 minutes, I will show you who cashes in every time the bombs start dropping. We will trace the whole thing, from a former US vice president named Dick Cheney to a company in Kyiv you have never heard of. And you will see why the same trick keeps working. War after war after war. Let's build the machine together. Every war runs on things. Bullets, missiles, drones, boots, fuel, bandages. Every single one of those things is made by a company, sold to a government, and paid for with your money. It is the only product on Earth where the customer never checks the price and the budget somehow never runs out. So how do you get rich off it? There are 4 doors. Keep count. Door 1, you build the weapons. Door 2, you lend the government the money to buy the weapons. Door 3, you grab the contracts to feed the troops, move the fuel, and rebuild the rubble. Door 4, you buy the stock and watch it climb every time the news gets worse. 4 doors. The same 4 doors your great-grandfather walked through in 1917, and the same 4 doors open on your phone tonight. Let me show you where it all started. 1914. Europe strolls into the First World War expecting a short, glorious scrap. 4 years later, 20 million people are dead, and the front is burning through shells faster than the factories can ship them. Somebody has to make all that ammo. In America, that somebody is a chemical company called DuPont. Between 1915 and 1918, DuPont clears about $1 billion selling explosives. On some batches of gunpowder, the profit margin runs near 1,000%. Picture handing over 10 cents and getting $1 back for powder that burns up in 1 second. The banks smell it too. JP Morgan and friends loan Britain and France over $2 billion so they can keep shopping. Which means Wall Street now has a very personal reason to root for the side it lent to. If that side loses, the loans might never get paid back. The newspapers give these companies a nickname that sticks: the Merchants of Death. In 1934, the US Senate drags them in for questioning. 93 hearings later, the picture is grim. Firms had sold weapons to both sides of the same war, bribed officials, and quietly torpedoed peace talks that were bad for business. And after all that outrage, almost nothing changes. The machine is already too profitable to switch off. But one man is about to walk on stage and warn you about it. And trust me, he is the last guy you would expect. Meet Dwight Eisenhower, 5-star general, the man who ran D-Day, the largest invasion in human history. Then he becomes president. Nobody, and I mean nobody, could call this guy soft on the army. So in 1961, on his last night in office, Eisenhower goes on live television and drops a warning that still gives generals chills. He tells the entire country to fear something he names the military-industrial complex, a tangle of arms companies, generals, and politicians whose paychecks all depend on the country staying ready for war. His nightmare was simple: that this club would start craving wars, not to win them, but just to keep the money flowing. That warning is 65 years old now. Take a wild guess how well the country listened. Because the next big test rolls into a desert, and this time, the bill is astronomical. 2003, America invades Iraq. Forget the politics for a second and just read the receipts. The main character here is a contractor called Halliburton, and its subsidiary, KBR. And here is a fun coincidence. Halliburton's former CEO had just landed a new gig. His name was Dick Cheney. and he was now the Vice President of the United States. Small world. Over the war, KBR rakes in at least $39 billion in contracts. They feed the troops, haul the fuel, build the bases, and yes, do the laundry. A ton of it is billed cost plus, which is the greatest sentence in business. The government pays whatever it costs, then hands you a guaranteed profit on top. Read that again. The more you spend, the more you make. Gee, what could go wrong? In 2003 alone, Halliburton posts record revenue of $16.3 billion. At one point, there are more paid contractors walking around Iraq than actual soldiers. When the dust settles, private companies have hauled more than $138 billion out of that war. The soldiers came home with scars. The shareholders came home with dividends. Now hold that thought, because 2026 makes Iraq look like pocket change. Remember that $2.887 trillion? Let's meet the big spenders. The United States drops $954 billion in a single year, more than the next several countries combined. China, around $336 billion. Russia, $190 billion. Germany and India climbing fast. Europe alone jacked its war budget up 14% in 12 months. Everybody is arming up at once, like the whole planet got the same scary text. And Trump's plan for next year? He is asking Congress for $1.5 trillion. That would be the fattest military budget any nation has ever requested, anywhere, ever. So where does all that cash actually go? Straight onto the stock market and up. The 5 biggest weapons makers on Earth are all American: Lockheed Martin, RTX, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, General Dynamics. One of them, RTX, watched its stock jump about 60% in a single year. A smaller drone outfit called Kratos nearly tripled, up almost 200%. While your grocery stocks flatlined, the war stocks printed all-time highs. If you owned a slice of war last year, congratulations, you crushed it. Add it up, and the 100 biggest arms firms booked $679 billion. Another record. And what lit the fuse under all of it? 2 wars you already know by name. Start with Ukraine. Since the invasion, it turned into the single biggest weapons buyer on the planet. Its arms imports exploded 100-fold. Every rocket flying toward the front is a sale, booked in some factory far away and perfectly safe. But here is the twist that should really open your eyes. The rebuild is worth more than the war. Fixing Ukraine is now priced at $588 billion over 10 years, almost 3 times the country's entire economy. The same firms that sold the missiles will line up to pour the concrete. Heads they win, tails they win. And do not assume the profiteers are all foreigners. Ukraine grew its own war industry, and it already has its own scandal. Meet Firepoint, a company that barely existed before 2022, now one of Ukraine's biggest arms makers. It builds the FP-1 strike drone and the Flamingo cruise missile, and in 2025 alone, it landed around $1 billion in state contracts. Then the Anti-Corruption Bureau, NABU, opened a case codenamed Midas. Investigators are asking whether Firepoint padded its prices and overstated how many drones it actually delivered. Ukrainska Pravda published secret tapes tying the firm to Tymur Mindich, a co-owner of Zelensky's old comedy studio and a close personal friend of the president. Mindich fled the country hours before the raids. Firepoint denies everything, and no charges have been proven. But watch the door spin. Who shows up on Firepoint's board in the middle of the storm? Mike Pompeo, the former U.S. Secretary of State. Even in a country getting bombed, the arms business has room for one more well-connected friend. Now the second war, Gaza, and the fight around Israel. While Netanyahu's government keeps the operations rolling, 3 Israeli defense firms grew their arms revenue 16% in a year to $16 billion. One of them, Elbit, banked over $6 billion in profit. The war is a catastrophe for almost everyone under the bombs. For a short list of shareholders, it is the best quarter of their lives. And no single flag has a monopoly on this. Look at Russia. Even buried under sanctions, its two biggest arms makers grew revenue 23%. The sanctions were supposed to bankrupt them. Instead, the war stuffed their order books, and Putin's tank plants went to round-the-clock shifts. Here is the uncomfortable punchline. In a big war, almost every country's arms industry wins at the same time. The flags are different. The business model is identical. So if everybody up top is cashing in, who is stuck holding the bill? You. Every time. Let me show you the 4 ways this money gets lifted straight out of your pocket. 1. Taxes. Every missile is bought with cash pulled right out of your paycheck. That $954 billion in America, it comes out of schools, roads, hospitals, and your wallet. Economists even have a name for the trade: guns or butter. Every dollar spent on guns is a dollar not spent on you. 2. Debt. When taxes are not enough, the government borrows, and you are on the hook for the interest for the next 30 years. 3. Inflation. Printing fresh money for war quietly shrinks the cash already sitting in your pocket. Ask Germany. After the First World War, one loaf of bread cost billions of marks, and people burned cash to stay warm because it was cheaper than firewood. And 4. The quiet one. The one nobody bills you for. The strongest young workers get shipped off to fight instead of build. Every soldier lost was a plumber, a nurse, a coder, or a teacher the economy never gets back. And you pay all 4 bills: taxes, debt, inflation, and lives. That is the real ticket price. And the 4 winners we just met, they never pay a cent of it. Which brings us to the only question that matters. Why does this never, ever stop? Because the whole thing is wired backwards on purpose. A company that sells weapons only grows when the world stays scared. So these firms spend fortunes making sure the phone in Washington never stops ringing. It is called lobbying, and in the defense game, it is the single best investment money can buy. A few $1,000,000 slipped to the right people can unlock billions in contracts. Then there is the revolving door, and it never stops spinning. A general retires on Friday. On Monday, he is sitting on the board of the exact company he used to buy missiles from. Everyone in that boardroom knows the same thing. The next war means the next bonus. And fear practically sells itself. Every threat, real or hyped, is a fresh sales pitch on the evening news. This is the exact monster Eisenhower saw coming. A system that quietly needs enemies to stay rich. It is not one villain stroking a cat in a chair. It is thousands of ordinary people, all quietly following the money in the same direction. That is why it outlives every president, every party, and every peace deal ever signed. So what are you supposed to do with all this? You are not shutting down the Pentagon tonight. You do the one thing the whole machine prays you never do. You follow the money. Next time a headline screams that war is coming, ask the colder question. Not just who is right, ask who gets paid. Watch whose stock pops the morning after the first missile flies. Notice when the same faces that sold you the war show up to sell you the rebuild. None of this means every soldier is a fraud or every war is invented. Real threats exist, and some fights are genuinely worth having. The point is different. The people bankrolling both sides of a conflict are, shockingly often, the exact same people. War does not burn the world's money. It moves it, from the many to the very few, and it always has. You have spent your whole life standing at the wide end of that funnel. The only new thing today is that now you can see it. The next war is already in a budget. The contracts are already being drafted. The one thing they truly need from you is that you keep not looking. So look. Keep asking who gets rich. That single habit is the one product they can never sell you. If this cracked your eyes open even a little, do me one small favor. Subscribe, and send it to one person who still thinks war is only about flags. Because the more of us who track where the money goes, the harder it gets to run this whole scheme in the dark. Next time, we chase a different trail of cash. Same rule always applies. Watch who gets paid. Stay sharp out there. It is your money they are counting.